What's up guys, it's Justin here, and today I've got a review of one of my favorite phones that has come out this year so far, and that is the OnePlus 6. So the reason why this review is so late is because OnePlus didn't send me this phone in every color like they did for a lot of people, but that wasn't going to stop me from reviewing this. But even at the $529 starting price point, as someone who reviews a lot of flagship phones, this is still one of my favorites, and I've actually really enjoyed the previous generations, including the OnePlus 5T and the OnePlus 5, because of the hardware experience, but also the fact that the software is nearly stock Android. OnePlus has essentially been releasing devices every 6 months over the past year, and this newest generation has the screen, of course, that goes almost edge to edge with the notch in the middle, but also the fact that you might notice it comes in a nice glossy and shiny black color, which is a glass back. Unfortunately, even with a Gorilla Glass back, it doesn't have wireless charging, which is something that I really would have liked to seen, but you do have to keep in mind that at the price point, you just can't have everything. What you do still have though is dash charging, which is one of the quickest fast chargers available on the market. On the inside, you also have a Snapdragon 845 processor with up to 8 gigs of RAM, and it also comes in a few storage options as well, depending on how much you need, but the storage is non-expandable. Around the other parts of the hardware of the phone, you're going to find your volume rockers on one side, and you're also going to find the alert slider, which is one of my favorite features when it comes to hardware on the OnePlus line. It makes it very easy to switch your notifications on and off, which is something that I do quite often, and there is also the power button below that. On the bottom of your phone, you're also going to find a USB Type-C port as well as a headphone jack, which is nice to still see. And on the back, you have your fingerprint sensor, which is still fast and responsive. The face unlock on the OnePlus line also works very well. It's one of the faster ones that I've tested, but security is definitely of question because of it being that fast. OnePlus does advertise the phone to be rain resistant, which essentially means that a splash or two isn't going to damage the phone, and it might actually be indeed water resistant based on some tests that I've seen on the internet, but it isn't officially IP rated because in order to reduce costs of the device, the certification obviously does cost a lot of money to be officially IP rated. I think on hardware, when it comes to the device's specifications and what's inside and what you get at the price point, this device really has no complaints, but I would have liked to seen wireless charging just as an option. Of course, being a device that looks incredible because of its glossy back and the glass finish, you do have to be careful of scratches and fingerprints long term. So a great thing you might want to pick up is a dbrand skin that comes in many different colors and textures that also gives your device a unique look, and I'll leave a link to that down below. The display itself is a 6.28 inch 1080 by 2280 display that does have a notch, and it fills up most of the front of the phone, which is why the phone itself, despite having such a large screen, doesn't feel overly big to hold on. It's an optic AMOLED display, and unlike the OnePlus 5T, this is probably one of the best displays that I've tested, and I don't really care about the fact that it might be 1080p instead of QHD, but because the display is nice and crisp, the colors look very accurate but still stand out to a degree where it's pleasant, makes it one of the better experiences that I've had, especially coming from the iPhone 10. Even though there is a notch, there is enough space on both sides to make it very easy to swipe down from either side to access all your settings. And if the notch isn't your thing, you're able to disable that and use the display essentially as is. And being such a large screen, you still have tons of real estate. When it comes to the camera on the OnePlus 6, it is a dual camera setup that consists of both a 16 and 20 megapixel camera, with one being the main cam and the other being better for low light. The camera experience on the OnePlus 5T was overall very good, but it wasn't exactly a wow factor when compared to other flagship devices, which makes total sense. I would say that the camera on the OnePlus 6 is good, but once again, nothing that really blows anything out of the water. It didn't really blow me away. And although the quality is very good for just social media posting and stuff, it isn't exactly a camera that I would go out of my way to use. There is also a portrait mode that mainly utilizes a second camera, and although it did do a decent job, it once again isn't something that I'd go out of my way to use. On the front, you have a 16 megapixel camera, and when it comes to video recording capabilities, this camera can record at up to 4K. As you guys can see from the samples here, at the price point and the spec sheet of this phone, the camera does perform very well and exactly how it should. Ever since the first generation of the OnePlus line, one of the things that I enjoyed the most about this phone is the software experience. It is just so smooth, so nice and fluid. It feels a lot like stock Android, but the things that OnePlus has gone out of their way to add in Oxygen OS have been things that I actually use and in some cases find superior to Google's own stock Android. Sliding down from the top, you have a very typical notification tray and also toggled settings, and going into the settings, it is very clean and simple as you might be used to, but you do also have a good level of customization when it comes to widgets, wallpapers, and home settings. And being someone who has tested out pretty much every flagship Android device, I don't know what it is, it might be the animations, but the device just always feels so fluid and responsive. Of course, with a Snapdragon 845 processor and 8 gigs of RAM, that is more than this phone is probably ever going to need, but it is just always nice to have. Sliding over to the left side, I really like what OnePlus has done in terms of giving you a drawer of recent apps, contacts, the dashboard with some information about your device, and also just the ability to add cards or widgets that you might want to access the most. As for battery life though, I think this is another example of where OnePlus has done a good job in merging the hardware and software experience that all kind of just makes sense. You have a 1080p display with a 3300 mAh battery, and that in turn gives you a much better battery life than you will get out of a QHD display. But like I said, the display is still one of the best despite being at a lower resolution than a lot of the flagship phones that I've tested out. The dash charging can literally give you a full day of charge in 20 minutes, and on heavy use, I'm able to get a full day, if not a day and a half, on the OnePlus 6. So even though wireless charging would have been nice to see, the fact that you can charge your device for a full day of use in under half an hour and have the ability to last an entire day, I think that kind of overrides the fact that this device needs a wireless charger, but with the glass back, I felt like there was an opportunity to do so. When it comes to audio quality though, like a lot of the cheaper smartphones that you have on the market, that is probably one of the categories that a lot of companies just don't seem to care as much about, and that is definitely the case here. The speakers are bottom firing and don't sound the greatest. I mean, they work as they should. But it really would have been nice to see like a stereo setup, even if they had to make the notch on the top even slightly larger. With such a large and beautiful display with a great battery life, I'm sure a lot of people will want to consume multimedia on this device, that I feel like if there was that stereo speaker setup, it would just really complete all of the major checklists for even a flagship device. At the end of the day, can I recommend the OnePlus 6? And the answer is obviously yes. This is a device that starts at $529 and has a beautiful screen that is large. It also has kind of a futuristic look to it. You've got great build quality, the glass back, you've got a button that I find very useful, the alert slider, a fingerprint sensor, all of the top end specs, a Snapdragon 845 as well as 8 gigs of RAM, which is insane. And just to cap things off, a great battery life and overall a pretty decent camera, especially at its price point. Not often are you gonna find a dual camera setup with 4K video recording and OIS on a device of this price. And to be totally honest, after having this device for about a month, I really didn't have any major complaints about it, and if I were to pick an Android phone to use right now, this is the one. There's just something that I really like about OnePlus devices, and I think it's just due to the fact that the software and hardware is so simple. I think what's really impressive is that I still see people using the OnePlus One, and that is a device that came out so many years ago, and you don't really see anyone using another Android phone from that time. That device came out at a budget price point and has really stood the test of time, and OnePlus has essentially built a fan following that has continued to many generations. Although OnePlus 6 no longer really offers a device at that very low budget price that the initial OnePlus phone did, it's very clear that OnePlus is still stuck to the motive of value, and this device, coming in at about $500 at its starting price point with flagship specs, is able to effectively compete with devices that cost almost double the price. If the OnePlus 6 was to come in at the price point of a flagship smartphone such as a Samsung Galaxy, but to have a better camera and wireless charging, I would almost go as far as to say that this would be the best Android smartphone on the market hands down. I think the simplicity and reliability is really what has made the OnePlus line my favorite line of Android devices. Being someone who takes a lot of photos on my smartphone, this definitely is not my first choice. I do still carry my iPhone around, but you have to remember that that phone was over $1,000 and this starts at $529. As always, if you guys have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comment section below and drop a like on this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.